Guys, when it comes to chess, Magnus Carlsen is arguably one of the best players in the world. But if there is one aspect of the game where Magnus Carlsen is an absolute GOAT, it's the end game. So in this video today, we will be seeing three games of Magnus Carlsen where he was dead lost out of the middle game, but managed to make an insane comeback in the end game, thanks to his very great skills in the particular aspect of the game. So let's get started. Our first game is from the 2019 and it's actually from the home country of our protagonist Magnus Carlsen, that is the Norway. The tournament is Norway Chess and this is round 2 game between Levon Aronian and Magnus Carlsen. Just for the context, both Levon Aronian and Magnus Carlsen has actually drawn their first round game, so both were on half points. So let's see how this game went. So initially we have uh, the Sicilian on the board, and in this position, actually the main move, as you know, must be the D5 move, that is the open Sicilian, which is the most popular response in this position. But Levon Aronian decides to surprise Magnus Carlsen here with the Rossolimo, that is the move Bishop B5. He just wants to surprise Magnus Carlsen and does not want him to play his usual Sicilian, which Magnus Carlsen is very good at because of his World Championship prep. So after this, we have a bunch of prep from both the sides wherein they play all the known moves that are there, and we reach this position wherein Magnus Carlsen just plays the move knight to h4. So what Magnus Carlsen's idea is to basically get his knight on the h4 on the f4 square and basically launch an attack against this king. So let's see what Levon Aronian comes up as a reply with. So he basically plays the move a3 and tells Magnus Carlsen that you can attack as much as you want on the king side. I am going to expand on the queen side and win on that side. So Magnus Carlsen basically plays the move e7 and he is now keeping his option open of castling on both the sides with the move bishop to e7. So after that, we have this move queen to b8. Basically, this move is supporting the idea of playing b4 in the future and creating play on the queen sides. So Magnus Carlsen absolutely does not care about that idea and as planned goes with the move knight to f4. The idea is just to give a check here. So Levon Aronian plays the move b4 as we had uh, expected, and now Magnus Carlsen decides to give a check. The king just sidesteps and Magnus Carlsen plays the move knight to d4. Now here if Levon Aronian, let's say, decides to take, then after it takes back, this bishop will be very awkwardly placed, as you can see on this square, because that is the only square that is available to the bishop. It can't go here, and of course it can't go back because it is blocked. So that will be very bad for him, and also taking with the bishop here is not much recommended. Therefore, in that position, actually Levon Aronian decides to go back with his knight to the g1 square. So in this position now, Magnus Carlsen wants to brutally attack Levon Aronian. So he plays the move g5. Now you can see from the bar that this move is actually a very critical move in the position, because now what this pawn is being protected by is this bishop. But now this bishop is also doing the job of protecting this pawn. So what Levon Aronian does is he simply takes off this pawn, and after bishop take, he just chops off this pawn. Now of course Magnus Carlsen must not have missed that and just hung his pawn. His idea was basically that to get the rook on this file and attack this king. So currently the king is very well protected because it has lot of pieces around itself, but Magnus Carlsen wants to surely change that. So Levon Aronian of course sees that his bishop is hanging and goes back. And now, as I had told you guys, Magnus Carlsen will look to either trade down these pieces or somehow misplace them so he can attack the king. So Magnus Carlsen brings his bishop back and asks Levon Aronian to trade. But Levon Aronian of course does not want to trade this very good bishop of him, which is currently putting a lot of pressure on this diagonal. So after that move, we have just castles from Magnus Carlsen's, and Levon Aronian plays this move of knight to c4, putting pressure on this pawn which is currently hanging. So Magnus of course sees that and decides to protect it. And now that we have a stable position for Levon Aronian, he is completely a pawn up. The engine also prefers his position. He decides to expand on the queen side. As you can see, the king is currently on the queen side, and Levon Aronian can actually benefit from that fact that his pieces are very well placed on the queen side. If you can see these two pieces, so let's see who is actually attacking who. So Magnus Carlsen in desperation plays this move knight to e3. His idea is he wants to get on this f4 square, and which will be a very good attacking piece on that side if he manages to successfully do that. But now Levon Aronian plays this move of f3, telling that bishop to just go away from that square. And after the bishop moves, he plays this move of bishop to f2. This bishop is like a beautiful diagonal. This bishop has occupied this beautiful diagonal in right now. Magnus Carlsen has to do something about it. So what he does is he just again asks Levon Aronian to just exchange of this bishop, but this time Levon Aronian finally decides that he has to exchange that bishop for the lack of move. So after the exchanges have been done, Levon Aronian finally gets his last piece into the game that was stuck on this not so beautiful square, and now Magnus Carlsen also brings his bishop back, attacking this knight. If he can exchange this bishop with that knight, it will be very beneficial for him, because if you can see, this is a very good knight. Levon Aronian, of course, does not allow the great player that he is. He understands that his knight is better than the bishop, so he avoids the trade. And now we have this beautiful move from Magnus Carlsen. So Magnus Carlsen is now down upon. The engines are screaming against him that he is in a worse position. So he has to decide something. So what he basically does is he is now trying to get in into the white's position with the move rook to d2. This rook queen d2, if it is allowed, then it will be very dangerous for Levon Aronian, because it will put a lot of pressure on a lot of pieces and he will be in deep trouble. But Levon Aronian sees this threat and quickly plays the move queen to e1. Now this move does not allow, of course, to infiltration, so Magnus has to just now trade down into a pawn down endgame. You can call it sort of a queenless middle game, but this is sort of an end game. So what just people do in the end game is they just take some space. Magnus does not allow the white to take further space with a5 by playing a5 himself. Now both the sides are just making some developmental moves. Both are trying to get their king into very good position in the center. That's where the king belongs, in the center. And basically Levon Aronian will now try to get in the break g5 if he can. But Magnus Carlsen, of course, does not allow that by playing the move bishop to e6, and Levon Aronian anyway wants to somehow get in the move g5. So after that move, we have Magnus Carlsen playing the move rook to h8. Now you will say that that just allows the move pawn to g5, because but actually it does not, because what happens is, let's say if you push, then I can just take, and let's say you take back with the knight or pawn, it doesn't matter. Your pawn on h4 at the end is hanging, so you can't actually play the move g5 as of now. So what Levon Aronian does is he just protects the pawn, and we have some more developing move from Magnus Carlsen. And finally Levon Aronian plays this move rook to d1. He has said enough is enough. Now I am finally going to break in the center with the move d4. And what Magnus Carlsen has to do is he can just wait and watch, because in this position, if one player can push for a win, it's Levon Aronian, as he is up a pawn. So Levon Aronian finally decides to break in with the center. We have takes, and knight takes at the end. And Magnus Carlsen tries to take back the open file, and knight decides to go back as it was hanging. Now, actually, in this position, what Levon Aronian could have done better is he could have played the move knight e to f5, such that this rook does not get into the 7th rank and does not occupy this open file, and also this knight is very well placed on f5 square. But okay, Levon Aronian decides to go back, and now Magnus Carlsen actually infiltrates into the 7th rank of white, but you can see that stay is very short lived, because now after the move king to e1, the rook can no longer continue his stay on the 7th rank and has to come back behind. So now Levon Aronian finally gets his knight on the f5 square, and Magnus Carlsen plays this very weird looking move of rook to e8. But this has a very good idea of breaking with b5. So idea is to play with play b5. Let's say I play a weird looking move like this, then I can just play this move and have a very good outside passer that will provide a perfect counter play even though I am down a pawn. So Levon Aronian, of course, does not allow that, and he plays the move knight to c3. Now knight to c3 just does not allow, because that does not allow b5 to be pushed, because your pawn would be just hanging after takes and takes. So that stops the idea of b4. So now Magnus Carlsen decides to attack this knight. Levon Aronian goes back. Magnus Carlsen now wants to fully infiltrate with his king. He wants to compensate for the fact that he's down a pawn but has an active king. But now Levon Aronian plays this very beautiful move of rook to d1 check, because what that does is you can no longer go to, let's say, you can't say that I will be more active with my king, because as you can see from the arrows that after move like g3 and f4, the king could get into sort of mating net. So rather than going there, Magnus Carlsen of course decides to come back with his king, and this rook occupies this very good position on the d4 square. Now, what Magnus Carlsen is doing with this move of rook to a6 is that he sees that he can't no longer occupy this open d file, and also this semi-open g file is of not much use to him. So what he wants to do is he wants to artificially get to the b6 and get artificially open file for himself. So let's see how successful that is, because Levon Aronian just activates his king, and in this position, Magnus Carlsen plays this horrible move of b6. His idea was actually to get to b6, and he was successful in getting to b6, but now this is the actually a critical and game losing blunder from Magnus Carlsen. Now what Levon Aronian can do is he can play this spectacular move of rook to d5. Yeah, you can see that the rook is hanging from two pieces, but it doesn't matter. So let's say you decide to take with the pawn, then I can just take back with my knight, and you can see that the knight and the rook, sorry, the king and the rook are both forked. So let's say you decide to take with the bishop as well, then my other knight replaces that knight, and again I am forking your uh, king and rook. So let's say you move, I'll just take your knight, and I'm 2 pawns up and completely winning in this position. So it doesn't matter if you take with the rook or bishop. Sorry, if you take with the pawn or the bishop, it was completely losing. And if you are not taking that, your pawn and your knight both are hanging, that would be completely losing for you. So if Levon Aronian can play this move, he would be completely winning, and Magnus Carlsen would be totally busted. But to all of our surprise, Levon Aronian actually does not find the move rook to d5. Yeah, maybe the pressure of time or the pressure of playing Magnus Carlsen got to him, and he instead plays this move of knight to f5. Now you can see that Levon Aronian is still better, but this position is not as winning as the one we had just seen. So Magnus Carlsen just seizes this opportunity and just chops this bishop off and gets into Levon Aronian's position. Now, Levon Aronian, of course, attacks the knight on the c5 square, and Magnus Carlsen just defends it. We have a check from Aronian, takes, and Magnus Carlsen is now still down a pawn, and he still works according to the engines, but at least he has some activity and he can get some counterplay out of that. Now, Levon Aronian correctly plays the move here g4, trying to create a passed pawn on the king side after takes and takes. Now you can see that this h pawn is a passer, and if Levon Aronian can successfully push it, then he will win the game very easily. So we have some normal looking moves from both the sides, and we reach this position in which Magnus Carlsen has just played the move b4, and you can see from the eval bar that engines are shouting that Levon Aronian will win this game easily, Levon Aronian will win this game easily. So maybe if engine was playing, it would have won like 100 out of 100 times. But when you are playing humans, the human element comes into the picture, that when you are in time trouble, you're sometimes not able to find the most correct moves. So in this position, actually Levon Aronian, you will see that this is a very critical position. The engines are shouting like whole advantage to the white. But in this position, Levon Aronian actually plays the move h5, a very normal looking move. You have this passed pawn, and there is a saying in chess, that passed pawns are meant to be pushed. So Levon Aronian follows that saying and just plays the move h5 in this position. But you can see from the eval bar that the eval bar that was completely in white's favor has now dropped down to almost zero. Because what Magnus Carlsen can actually do now is he can get from behind and now stop this pawn, and now the pawns are no longer moving anywhere. So if Magnus Carlsen can now just play this move of getting from behind, then he is completely fine. But actually, what was winning here was actually the move g5. Levon Aronian had to find this move g5, because after, let's say, takes and takes, he can, let's say Magnus Carlsen goes ahead with his idea of b5 attacking this pinned pawn. Then what Levon Aronian could have done is he could have simply gone here and protected this pawn from behind, because a passed pawn should be protected by the rook from the behind. So let's say if king comes close, I can just push, and if king takes, then I can just go behind, and there is no way that you can stop this pawn. You can try as you want, but you won't be able to stop this pawn. So let's say you decide to take here, I can just move my king away, and now there is no way for the rook to stop the pawn, because let's say you go here, then I can just push, and now this square is no longer available to this rook, so this pawn is merely unstoppable. But okay, in the actual position, uh, Levon Aronian actually went for the move h5, and Magnus Carlsen actually does not go from behind to stop the pawn. He actually goes ahead with his idea of attacking this pin pawn. But now what Levon Aronian can do is, and what he correctly does it, he gives a check and protects his pawn. Now Magnus Carlsen again either has to play b3 or go with the same idea of uh, like attacking the pawn from behind. But Magnus Carlsen actually takes this pawn on the a4, and now again what Levon Aronian can do is he can give a check to the king, make the king go away, and then again play the move g4 such that these two pawns will be unstoppable. But now again, Levon Aronian misses the fact that he can actually play the move g4, or first give a check and then play g4, and he has sort of like tunnel vision, and he plays the move h6. He only sees that the h pawn is passing, but he sort of misses this idea of it, that rook can go back. So Magnus Carlsen like finally understand that he has to go from behind and place the move rook to a1. We have takes, and rook takes from Levon Aronian. Now Magnus Carlsen can actually here just go here and chop off this pawn, but see how beautifully Magnus Carlsen does it. He first gives this check and makes the king go away from these two pawns. Now you might wonder that here why can't I just take, because your rook would be hanging and you would be completely lost. So you can't take that pawn. So Levon Aronian has to play this. Now Magnus Carlsen gets behind, and there is no way for Levon Aronian to protect this pawn. So we have just takes, and this position is actually a trivial draw at the super GM level. So they play out a few moves, but at the end in this position, both of them agree to a draw, because there is no way for white to make a progress, because there is no way for it to escape check. So let's say you move here, I'll just go here, you go here, I can just keep giving checks, and if you try to come ahead, I can just attack your pawn, and if you, let's say, push it, then I can like give a check here, and this would be a drawn position. So finally at the end, even though Magnus was like a down a pawn from like move 1, he was managed to somehow trick Levon Aronian, or Levon Aronian was actually not able to find that idea of g5 in the end game, which would have meant that he would have won the game. But Levon Aronian was not just able to find it, and Magnus capitalized whenever he could. He found some brilliant resources when he had the choice. He exchanged the pieces. He got into a queen-less endgame, even though he was down a pawn, and he showed at the end a great character defending that lost position. So that was our first game, wherein Magnus Carlsen absolutely effortlessly did manage to win. Here we have our second game from the London Chess Classic from 2017. This is a game between Magnus Carlsen, who is with the white pieces, and Michael Adams, who is with the black pieces. This is actually the seventh round game between Carlsen and Michael Adams. So in this game, actually, Magnus surprises us on the very first move itself with the move 1 f4. Now, Magnus Carlsen has only played this move about like 6 games in his classical career, and he has won like all the games that he has played with 1f4. So it has been very good for him. So one of the reasons why I think Magnus Carlsen went with the move 1f4 was that Michael Adams has actually been a second of Magnus Carlsen. That means that he has in the past helped Magnus Carlsen with the openings, and also Magnus Carlsen thinks that Michael Adams might know all the openings that I have prepared. So instead, he decides to surprise Michael Adams with the move 1 f4. So after that, we have all the theory that is there from both the sides, and both the sides decides to castle here. So generally, the idea in these positions is that you want to undermine the center that black has temporarily acquired. So you have the normal move like d3. We have c5 from Michael Adams developing this developing this pawn before developing your knight, and we have a bunch of normal looking moves from both sides. Now you can see that Magnus Carlsen has actually developed his knight to a3 with the probably idea of playing the knight later to the c7 square, sorry, c2 square. So we have rook to e8 from Michael Adams. Then now this knight to h4 move is actually aimed at playing e4 and finally undermining the black center. So we have b6, and finally Magnus Carlsen as anticipated goes with the move e4. We have d takes from Michael Adams, and in this position normal looking move for anyone could be just to take back, but what Magnus Carlsen wants to do is he does not want to give up on his chances of winning. And the most chances that you can have if you want to win is by keeping the queens on. So he actually goes and attacks this knight uh, of Michael Adams and tells him that you first defend your knight or you move your knight and then I will take that. What a normal person like us will do is he will play move like maybe bishop to d7 or bishop to b7 and defend the knight. But Michael Adams actually finds here the best move in the position, that is queen takes d3. That must have come as a shock to Magnus Carlsen, because he must have really missed this move, because after let's say you take the knights, that's what's happened in the game. I can simply play this move of bishop to d7 and your queen is now very dangerously placed in black's camp. You only have now one move, that is queen to c7, and in this position actually Michael Adams played the move knight to g4. What actually Michael Adams could have done is he could have played the move, let's say rook to c8. After that, you can see that the queen has very less square. So let's say you get here, then I can play a bunch of winning moves, like I can play my bishop here and ask the queen that where it is going, because the queen simply has no place to go. Because let's say if you take, then I can just play my rook here and the only square you have is this, so I will again attack you. And if you let's say take here, then you can see that this queen is very dangerously placed in black's position, nowhere close to this king. This king is very weak with this open diagonal, this rook's looking down, so that would have been a very dangerous position for Magnus Carlsen. But instead we have knight to g4 from Michael Adams. Now again giving a chance to uh, Magnus Carlsen. Now he has to play this move f4 and make some room for his queen, or either maybe defend his, after let's say a move like g4, and let's say if you take, then that's already a blunder, because I can now protect my queen with the move like bishop to f4. So he has to find that, but that move is very difficult, and Magnus like plays a very normal looking move, that is rook to e1. Now, Michael Adams gets another chance of playing this move rook to c8, but he has some sort of blind spot. And since he's down already a piece, he decides to give back another piece with this spectacular move of bishop to d4. Now, of course, you have to take this bishop, because let's say if you go here, then that will just be a draw after moves like this. So, of course, Carlsen does not want a draw, so he decides to take the bishop. So now we have queen takes from Michael Adams. And now again, you can't move your queen, because if you move your king, then this is either mate in one or, okay, oops, sorry. okay, we are back. So, and you can't play this move because this will lead to a very nice smothered mate with this. This is a very one of the most beautiful mates in chess. You can actually keep in mind this very nice checkmating idea that is there. So that is a very good checkmating idea. So Magnus Carlsen has to of course block with his bishop. That's the only logical move that is there. And Michael Adams decides to just chop that bishop off. Now Michael Adams has an excellent chance of actually had an excellent chance of catching Magnus Carlsen, but he was not able to successfully do that. So Magnus Carlsen just comes back with his queen. So now the only plus point that Michael Adams probably has in this position is the pawn on e5 and probably this weak king. So Michael Adams just protect that pawn on e4, sorry, not e5, on the e4 square, he just protects it. And now Magnus Carlsen plays this very weird move of bishop to h3. But keep this move in mind for some time later because this move plays a very important role. So now Michael Adams here finally decides that he should trade the queen. So he plays this move and we have takes. Now actually Michael Adams maybe would have loved to take with the pawn, creating this strong pawn chain here, but he can't take because his knight is hanging currently. So he decides to take back with the knight. And now we again, like Carlsen, probably I don't know if this was a practical decision or he missed something, but he makes this very practical move of sacking the rook. Now I had told you to keep this move in mind. So basically what this move rook takes e4 does is you can you if you take, then your bishop at the end would be hanging, and now I have two pieces for the rook, and you no longer have that very good protected pass pawn and very good pawn chain. So this was basically Carlsen's idea with the move. Now Michael Adams just decided to take there and attack the bishop. Magnus Carlsen just retreats, and we have the pawn moving forward attacking this pawn chain. Uh, Magnus Carlsen just gets his rook into the game. After takes, we have the move a6 from Michael Adams. So the way for Magnus Carlsen to lose here or Michael Adams to win here is if Michael Adams can get this queenside majority rolling. So Magnus Carlsen of course does not want to allow that with the tempo. So he just decides to get his minor pieces uh, into a better squares. So Michael Adams just decides to get back with his knight, and after takes, Michael Adams actually has a very good position with this protected pass pawn and also the queen side majority that is there. But now now you will actually see how Magnus Carlsen handles such positions in which he is completely worse. He is completely worse in this position, but see how Magnus Carlsen handles it. First, he regroups his pieces to the better square and watch this move h4. This move h4 is so critical because first of all from uh, it takes space for white, and after a move like h5 it also does not allow clean mobility for black's king. So Magnus Carlsen's move h4 actually is very good with the intention of h5 and possibly in the future to attack this h7 pawn, after which this h5 uh, h4 h5 idea will be very good for him. So we have Michael Adams' idea is to create a passer on the queen side, but this idea also is very well handled by Magnus Carlsen with the move a4. Now what this move a4 does, it asks Michael Adams a question. Either you take here, let's say if I take, and then all these pawns are very weak and they will fall for sure, and Michael Adams will no longer have any advantage to claim. So what instead Michael Adams does it, he brings his rook here and Magnus Carlsen has to take, and he plays this very nice move of knight to a3. Now this knight on the sides are usually not that great, but this knight is very good at stopping the mobility of these two pawns. First of all, it is attacking this pawn, and let's say if you decides to push the pawn, I can simply take this pawn. So you can't push that pawn and attack my knight. So it's a very good move. So Michael Adams, of course, decides to defend that pawn, and now we have a simple just shuffling of some pieces. Both the players are trying to find the best squares for their pieces. So we have a bunch of moves, and after this sort of developing moves, Magnus Carlsen finally goes in with his idea of h5. Now this move has two advantages. First of all, this pawn might become very strong passer if Carlsen can somehow get in and attack this h7 pawn. Second idea is that uh, it does not allow the king to come on this side. So it stops somehow the king's movement. And now king has to come forward like this. And now Magnus Carlsen again, he plays the move h6 and makes this h7 a permanent weakness. He sort of stabilizes that weakness, and now his idea will be to attack. Magnus Carlsen, after Magnus Carlsen's move h6, Michael Adams now decides that he has to be in close proximity of that pawn, otherwise that pawn might become very strong. So after that, we have this move rook to a1 and b4. So basically both are trying to get in their ideas. Magnus is trying to get in, he gives a check. We have king to e7. After this, Magnus Carlsen again gives another check, and we have sort of repetition. But now Magnus Carlsen can actually take this pawn and claim that he has equality with this passer. But again, Magnus Carlsen is very cautious about his opponent's counterplay, and he plays the move king to e1. What this move does, it actually prevents any sort of pushing ideas from Michael Adams, not allowing him to create a passed pawn that would be strong, because that king can now stop these passed pawns. So after this, Michael Adams plays this very good move actually of b3. So basically, let's say if you now waste your time in taking, then I can just play the move c3 here, wherein if you take, then I can just place my rook behind this passed pawn, and now no longer can anyone can stop this pawn. So that is the basic idea with the move c3. So Magnus Carlsen, of course, does not let the move c3 come in, and he plays this move of rook to b7. Uh, Again, we have some bunch of improving moves. Magnus Carlsen giving a checks and finally plays the move rook to b4, attacking this pawn on c4. So now Michael Adams can no longer protect the pawn, so he goes and attacks Magnus's pawn instead. So we have takes, and after bunch of exchanges have happened, Michael Adams plays the move here, king to d8. I don't fully understand this move, but I think the basic idea is that he does not want to get into this sort of stuff, so he is moving away from the danger. As well as I think his idea might be to pin this knight here like this. So Magnus Carlsen again gives a check and decides to attack this pawn on f5. So rather than going and defending passively, Michael Adams decides to attack his knight, which is actually uh, defending that bishop. So let's say if you decide to take, then I can just take your bishop here and you would be down in exchange. So Magnus Carlsen, of course, does not fall for that, and he instead gives a check. The king moves. We give another check from the rook, and this position is actually very critical from the game perspective, because now what Michael Adams has to do is he has to get his king up. He can't go on the last rank. But that's what exactly Michael Adams does. He gets the king cut off by this rook. You can see that this rook is completely cutting the king off out of the game. Not only that, the king will actually get in the mating net with this beautiful harmony of the pieces. Uh, the white pieces are beautifully coordinating in this position, and after the move king to b8, Magnus actually plays the move b3, protecting his bishop. Now, what Michael Adams says is that you are cutting off my king, I will also cut off your king. But the harmony between white species is actually much of higher quality than black's two rooks. And so Magnus Carlsen plays the move here, rook to b4, with the threat of forking the king and the rook. Now, you will think that in this position, why can't I just play rook to uh, a5 and threatening, as you can see from the arrow, threatening a mate here. That does not work simply because of the move knight to c6, forking here and here. So that would be just a completely losing move. So we don't have that from uh, Michael Adams. He instead gets away from this fork by moving the king instead. Magnus Carlsen anyway goes ahead with the move, and now again you might be tempted to play this move, but again that does not work because of the move bishop to e6. So the king only has one move. So let's say it goes here. I can again give you a check, and if you let's say go here, then I will give another check. And after the king moves, this check is very crucial because you can see that you can no longer go here, and you will have to go under the radar of this bishop. And once I move my rook to here, you will see that the king is in check, and also your rook is lost, and also you have lost the game. So that is not feasible. So after this knight to a6, actually Levonoron, sorry, why am I saying Levonoron? Levonoron lost the last game. So we have rook to c6 instead from Michael Adams. But this move also is like cannot save anything. Like right now, Michael Adams, whatever move he plays, he is completely lost. So Magnus Carlsen decides to give him a check. And now you can see that this why this king is so restricted by these two pieces that are beautifully coordinating, because the king can no longer go on this c7 square. It has to either go on b7 or d7. Both are losing, because let's say if you go here, then I will just pin your rook, and if you take here, I can just take, wherein I will be completely a piece up. And here, if you let's say decide to go here, then I can just play this move, forking your king and rook. And if you then attack my rook, I'll just give this check. My bishop is protecting my rook, and after you move, I just take here, and I'm completely winning. So in that position, actually, Michael Adams played this move of king to b7, and Magnus Carlsen, of course, followed it with bishop to d5. Michael Adams took, we have bishop takes from Magnus Carlsen, and Michael Adams continued for one move with king to b6, but after Magnus Carlsen attacked this pawn, there was no way for Michael Adams to continue this game, because Carlsen is just up a piece, and you can't beat Magnus Carlsen when he is up a piece in this endgame. So Michael Adams just resigns, and Magnus Carlsen, against he was completely lost out of the opening when Michael Adams could just trap Magnus Carlsen's queen, but Magnus Carlsen managed to stage an insane comeback even after being down in that end game where Michael Adams had beautiful majority on the queen side. He had a protected passed pawn on the e5, but Magnus Carlsen pushed with h4, h5, created a play with a4 that was very beautiful, and something that we can learn from Magnus Carlsen, that he created play on both the sides that was not manageable for Michael Adams, and at the end he succumbed to the pressure by playing that move king to b8. So that was our second game, and now we have our final game of the day today. This is the last game of our video. So last game is actually between a countryman of Michael Adams. Michael Adams is from England, and his countryman is Gawain Jones, who is with black pieces, against Magnus Carlsen from white pieces. This actually is a game from a very beautiful tournament, that is Vaikanze, or also now it is known as Tata Steel Chess Tournament. This is the classical tournament. They also have a Rapid and Bliss tournament that happens every year in India. And this is actually a round 8 game from 2018 between Magnus Carlsen and Gawain Jones. So this has a very beautiful opening, e4, e5, e4, c5. Actually, we have the Sicilian on the board, and not just the Sicilian. We actually have the coolest Sicilian, that is the Dragon Sicilian. And after a move like bishop to e3, usually you can't play this move bishop to e3 because I can just attack with this move. But you will see that the bar is absolutely jumping after a move like knight to g4, because what I can do is I can play this normal looking move of bishop to b5, giving a check. So let's say if you decide to now block with your bishop, you can see that this bishop is pinned, and I can simply take your knight, and you cannot take this because you are pinned here. So here, let's say if you decide to block with the knight, then anyway I can take because you are not protecting anything. And if you finally play this move, then I can just take, and after it takes, you can see that your rook at the end is hanging. So you can't directly attack my bishop. So Gawain Jones plays this normal move, bishop to g7, and after bunch of theory from both the sides. We are not going to go much detailed into the theory of the dragon Sicilian. We will get to the point where it starts getting interesting. So we have this move, bishop to c4 from Magnus Carlsen. He is basically attacking this pinned piece, that is this knight is pinned to this queen. It can't move, otherwise the rook will just take the queen. So Gawain Jones, of course, has to defend his knight. He can't just allow Magnus to take it. And now we have this very good prophylactic move from Magnus Carlsen's side, this move king to b1. Whenever you play long castles, if you can, you should always play the move king to b1, getting away from this open diagonal, which could be very handy in later positions. So again, Gawain Jones plays this normal move of rook to e8 in the future that may come handy, and Magnus Carlsen goes ahead with the knight to e4. Uh, Gawain Jones attacks that knight, and Magnus Carlsen goes and attacks the bishop that is there on the e6 square. Now, usually you don't want to give up your bishop for the knight because super GMs or grandmasters at this level love their bishops too much. So Gawain Jones just retreats with his bishop, and once like Jones has retreated, the move that Magnus Carlsen makes in this position, I think, is one of the most horrible moves that Magnus Carlsen has ever made in his classical chess, because I don't think Magnus Carlsen has made a blunder this huge in his career. He in this position plays the move g4. Now we will say that okay, this move is normal looking. He is attacking this weak king. If let's say you take and take, I will get this beautiful file to attack here. The problem with the move g4 is that what Magnus Carlsen also surprisingly missed is that, like, if you ever feel bad about your chess, just look at this game from Magnus Carlsen where he is blundered literally everything. So after that move g4, you can see that this bishop is actually guarding this knight. So if you could somehow stop the connection between the bishop and the knight, you can win the knight. And that's what exactly happens with the move f4. Gawain Jones just shuts the door on this bishop, telling him to go off from there, and then later Magnus Carlsen will lose this knight. So what Magnus Carlsen now has to do is he has to do damage control. So he plays this move h4, hoping for maximum chaos on the board. So Gawain Jones happily takes the bishop, and we have queen takes. Now you might wonder that why can't I just take the queen? Because you can't take, because this knight is actually pinned. Magnus Carlsen does not play so horribly that he will blunder the queen, but okay. And now we have attack on the knight with the move h6 from Gawain Jones. And Magnus Carlsen says, since I have given like one piece, I will give another piece with the move queen to c5. But this is actually a very good move, unlike the move g5 from Magnus Carlsen, because now if you decide to, let's say, take, then I can just take here. I can just take here, and then you can see that this rook as well as this knight is hanging, wherein Gawain Jones would be still winning, but he would not be winning as much as he was if he plays the move that he played in the game, that is the move bishop to b7. Now this move is actually the engine's preferred move rather than taking the knight. So Gawain Jones finds the best move in the position, and now Magnus Carlsen finally decides to save his knight. And we have this move to e6, protecting the entire sixth rank, that the pawns on the sixth rank. And we have the move h5 from Magnus Carlsen. What Magnus Carlsen can expect is, if he can create some chaos on the board, some form of disturbance or instability in the position, then he can get Gawain Jones to blunder. And that's exactly what happens in this position. Gawain Jones plays this move of queen to b6. What Gawain Jones could have done here is actually played the move g5, after which like the position is closed and Magnus Carlsen has no counter play. That entire king side is closed, and you have no play on the king side. You can't attack the king. So the deficit of a piece will be felt very much. But here in this position, actually Gawain Jones went ahead with this normal looking move of queen to b6. You are up a piece. You usually want to exchange the queens when you are up a piece, right? But actually this is not a very good move because of the crushing move that is g5. Now, this move actually allows Carlsen to create absolute chaos on the board because you can see that everything is facing against each other and everything is hanging on the king side. Now, you might say that I will just take here, but that is not very good move as evident from the engine bar itself, because I will take, and now you can see that both your bishop and the rook both are hanging. So let's say you will defend your bishop, but I will take, and I will play this very beautiful move of rook takes the knight. So let's say you take, and after takes, you can see that the king and the rook both are under the fire, both are getting forked. So if you, let's say, move your king, then I will just take here, and I'm completely up 2 pawns, and I'm completely winning in this position because the pawn speaks for itself. So we don't have that in the game. Gavin Jones does not take the queen. Instead, he takes the pawn with h takes g5. Magnus Carlsen now calmly decides to come back with his king. He has done the job of creating chaos. Now he has to keep the queen on the board. The position is now completely equal after Magnus had blundered the piece in the opening. So Gavin Jones decides to get his rook on that open file. Maybe he can also create a attack. Magnus Carlsen just shuts off the attack with the move b3. And another elemental blunder comes from the Gavin Jones. He retreats with his queen, possibly to defend this pawn that was attacked by the knight. But what Gavin Jones probably missed or misevaluated is this move, that is queen takes a7. Now, more than pawn grab, what is important here is the queen now can retreat and help in the attack on the queen. So that is more important than that pawn that I was managed to capture, that the queen can now join in the attack. So blunder after blunder, Gavin Jones again makes another elemental mistake of taking and allowing the rook on this fifth rank, allowing the rook lift. At the same time, he is attacking this pawn here, which Jones supposedly defends, but Magnus Carlsen in this position absolutely does not care that this position is defended twice, attacked it only twice. He decides to take the pawn, and after rook takes and knight takes, you can see that the queen no longer can take this knight because your rook at the end would be hanging, and also then the bishop might fall. So after that, we have this move from Gavin Jones protecting his bishop, going maybe with the idea of rook to a8. Magnus Carlsen has to now just do the job of getting all his pieces into the attack, and he should be completely fine now because now the king is so weak it does not have any pawns around itself and it will soon get mated. So we have, as predicted, the move rook to a8. Magnus Carlsen goes here, and again the knight can't take here because it is pinned. In this game, pins will play a very crucial role. So Magnus Carlsen, his queen is being persuaded by Gavin Jones again with the move rook to a6. Now again you can see that the bishop can't take because otherwise your queen would be hanging. So queen just again comes back here, and we have this move of queen to d7, seemingly defending the 7th rank. But now Magnus Carlsen plays this move of rook to e4 with the threat is now of playing this move of knight to f6. But you can see that this piece and this piece both are actually guarding that square, but none of them right now can actually access that square because this bishop actually is pinned like this and this knight actually is pinned like this. So actually this is a great threat now. Gavin Jones of course moves away from that, but his position is so worse right now that any amount of good moves will not help him. So Magnus Carlsen finally gets his queen back into the attack, and after a move like queen to e7, let's say, because that does not allow the queen to h4 square, but now Magnus Carlsen simply chops this rook off, and after takes, he even though can't get to the h4 square, he get to the h2 square, and he utilizes the pins in a beautiful manner. He notices that the bishop can't take, so he is right now attacking here. And Gavin Jones plays this sneaky move of rook queen to a7, attacking this rook on g7, g1 square. Now, tell me frankly, how many of you miss that after a move like rook to a queen to a7 that your rook was hanging. 99% of us would actually miss that the rook is hanging, but Magnus Carlsen, of course, the 2800 level, 2800 level player that he is, he does not miss that, and instead first gives the check, because since the queen left the defense of the king, he first gives a check, and after the king moves, he plays that very nice move of rook to g5. The idea is to play rook to f5, after which the only move that Gavin Jones can probably make is to resign. But he continues to play with the move rook to e6, now preventing this move of rook to f5. But what this move knight to e6 does it, he allows this check, and after the king moves, he gets his knight into the attack with all sorts of deadly threats in the position of taking as well. After a move like bishop to c8, Magnus Carlsen in this position again finds the absolute best move in this position and takes this bishop on the g7 square. And in this position, actually, Gavin Jones decided to resign, because after, if you decide to take, if you don't take, then you are simply, your queen is hanging, as you can see. So actually, you have to take. So if you take, I can just take this pawn here, and as you can see, both the king and queen, both the king and knight are being attacked, and there is no way for you to save the knight. So if you move your king, I will just take here, and now you can see that the pieces are completely equal, but only the problem is that your king is superbly weak, and I'm up 3 pawns, which is completely winning. So rather than continuing this position against the absolute endgame god Magnus Carlsen himself, Gavin Jones decided to resign this position, and Magnus Carlsen viewed his magic in the middle game this time and managed to make an insane comeback after like losing a complete piece in the end game. He made sure that there was absolute chaos on the board. He did not allow the pieces to get exchanged. He pushed with h5, he pushed with g4, and when the time came, he smashed absolutely. So that those were the three games that I wanted to show you guys, where Magnus Carlsen like blundered but still managed to win from that position. So I hope you enjoyed all those three games and you had fun watching them. If you like the video, make sure to of course like it, and I will see you until next time. Bye bye.